Shane Nassib always asks Robert and I, who can you recommend we get for the conference? And I know last year Senator was scheduled to be here, and then of course, as Robert pointed out, Matthew happened. So we're so glad you should come this year and join this great group. And with that, Robert and I are going to attempt to follow that act and give you a little bit of update of what happened last session, give you an idea of who the players are, including our wonderful senator with us today in Tallahassee, and then of course talk a little bit about what we're going to see this coming session. And then, of course, answer any questions.
Yeah, so in years past, as some of you may recall, I don't even know this. Yeah, it's on. In years past, we've tried to have some fun with talking about our friends in the legislature and about the process and comparing who the players are to something that maybe in pop culture makes some sense. We've tried things such as The Office. Some of y'all may remember that one. We've talked about SEC football or conferences and who fits in what conference. We've, of course, had pop stars like Miley Cyrus and Taylor Swift, and even Batman. We've tried that one year. So we're going to do something a little bit different this year. It may or may not work, so bear with us. But we're going to try this year in terms of the most rewatchable movies. So hopefully your favorite movie's on here. Chances are we whiffed and missed all of you, but we're going to try it anyway, talking about some of our friends in the process.
So let's take a quick look at last session, or if you will, let's go back to the future. There you go. There's our first one. All right. Great, Scott. Okay, let's talk about the budget, Robert.
So we'll start with the budget, and this will be a quick overview of the last legislative session. You see there some of the big items in the budget, ultimately about an $83 billion budget. The governor vetoed $410 million in projects, and he also vetoed the entire education budget, triggering a special session to come back and rewrite that. That $410 million was not by accident. It was because that needed to pay for a couple of things. It needed to pay for an increase in the FEFP for education finance. It needed to pay for $85 million in a new infrastructure fund, and it needed to pay for an increase in Visit Florida funding that had not been passed in the regular session. So that $410 million, while it hurt a lot of projects, cut a lot of projects, it was a number relevant to the deal that had been struck to call that special session.
And in that special session, you may recall, this got added later in the session and put in medical marijuana. So the bottom line is it allowed additional licenses of the already ones that existed, one reserved for the member of the Black Farmers Association, some for some of the runners-up, if you will, on the previous go-around when they were doing application, and then new applicants that could come through with some preference given to those that had citrus canning or processing plants in their portfolio of their medical marijuana license. Now, fast forward, part of that legislation said the new licenses have to be issued by October 3rd. Does anybody know what date today is? Today's the 5th. There are no new licenses issued, including the one to the Black Farmers Association. This was debuted really late in the process, the application. They haven't even accepted applications yet. Robert and I actually happen to work on one of the teams, so we're intimately familiar with some of this process. Some of it's just because after it was rolled out, they tried to fit that piece of legislation into an application that would work, figure out a way to do a preference, but not actually have a different silo for citrus canning or molasses. That process moved really slow. That was a joke. Okay, so I don't know what's going to happen. Thank you, Senator. I see you kind of laughing out of sympathy. Okay. It's a very good question. What's going to happen with that? They said they weren't going to make the deadline. Some of the would-be licensees are suing, and so here's the rub. Even if they hit the deadline, the chaos that it was going to be trying to process these licenses is immense. A couple years ago when they did Charlotte's Web, the low THC cannabis for seizure patients and what have you, there was a finite universe of people that could apply. You had to have a nursery for 30 straight years. You had to have a certain number of plants within your nursery, acreage if you will. So I think it came down to 32 or 33 applicants across the state. For this, if you've got a DAC, Department of Agriculture Commission Services license for the last 5 years, you're in. There's a lot of people that have those licenses, and there's a lot of folks and a lot of money involved in this that are going to apply. So we know there's tons of groups that are like a puzzle, putting all these pieces together, grabbing a nursery, grabbing a license, grabbing a medical director, and saying, let's see if this soup works. So they're going to have in the hundreds, I think, applicants when it all comes down. So will they have licenses by the end of 2018? Maybe, but it's going to be a tough hoe, and I'm sure the legislature is going to have some opinions on what they should do with that date and get the licenses out eventually.
Another topic that you probably saw a lot about, and it was a very focal focal point of the Florida Senate in particular, was Lake Okeechobee and investing in the southern reservoir to hopefully stop what Senator Bradley regularly called guacamole water. That was flowing down the rivers into the east and west coast of Florida. There was a bill that passed. That bill was, and we can talk about some of the trades that happened in session, but in many ways this was one of those trades. The Senate got this in exchange for the House getting something else. It ultimately included $64 million in immediate funding. During special session, there was another $50 million put in for the Herbert Hoover Dike to make repairs there. And the bill has $1.5 billion in spending capacity in future years through bonding, and that's something to keep an eye on in the future years as that construction begins to take place.
So conforming bills, to use a Back to the Future quote, these were heavy, more so than usual in previous years. So what these bills are is when the legislature puts forward the budget, the House or Senate, conforming bills are changes in statutes to work with the budget presented. So if they say we're going to fund this, but there's nothing that addresses that in statute, either authorizing or what have you, this will now change the statutes to conform the budget to the statutes, or conform the statutes to the budget. The big education bill that you heard about, 7069, that was a part of it. The governor ultimately approved, and now there's multiple lawsuits from various school districts involved in that. The Visit Florida, Enterprise Florida, Fix or what have you, that legislation was thrown into there in conforming bills. Needless to say, the budget chairman that Senator Flores works with so closely was not happy with the number of conforming bills. It will be interesting to see how this session goes as they go through that. But it was unusual, and that's why we pointed out. Usually in the past there's a few conforming bills here and there, but this past session the conforming bills were many, and they were thick, and often introduced at the last second, and a lot of that was because, as Robert said, a lot of the trading going on in the last second between the House and Senate as they tried to get the budget done on time.
And the last issue from last year that we'll point out to you is the super homestead exemption. This is another that sort of came in at the last minute. The House had passed it. The Senate, there was not great certainty on whether or not it would pass. The Senate, ultimately it did. And what that bill will do is in 2018, it'll go to the ballot an additional $25,000 in your homestead exemption. It was amended at the last minute on the Senate floor or in the Senate Budget Committee near the end to mitigate the impact of local governments just a bit. Instead of it, and I'm oversimplifying this, but instead of it being $25,000 additional on the 50 that you already have, it's $25,000 on the first $25,000 of the second 100 in value. So it ended up being about half. It cut the local government impact about in half, but it's still about a $611 million impact to local government statewide if it were to pass in 2018. And of course, it has to go to the ballot. 60% plus one of the voters in Florida would have to approve it, but it's something to keep an eye on for any of you that work with local government. It's something to keep an eye on. So we're going to try our little thing here. We'll see if it works. So we're going to start by saying we're going to talk about knowing the players and who they are and the importance of them. A lot of these faces, many of you will know. A lot of them, some of them may be new to you, but we'll ask you to bear with us here as we give this a try. So the governor, we think, is, as movies would go, most rewatchable movies, Star Wars. Star Wars is either beloved or maybe the opposite of that by people. But whether you like Star Wars or not, it shapes our culture. It shapes pop culture in America, and it even more so now with the new movies that are coming out. The governor, in that way, is involved in everything that goes on in Tallahassee, and his opinion in favor or against or neutral guides in some ways what happens in the legislature and what happens certainly at the agency level, because the governor is, at the end of the day, the chief executive officer of the state, and he operates very much in that way. So you sort of always have to have an eye on the governor's office and what they're doing and how they feel about certain things that may be going on in Tallahassee. And so our best attempt at that was Star Wars.
So there's also a speaker. We went with The Godfather on this one. There's the laughs. All right. So this speaker, more so than any in recent history of a presiding officer in the House or Senate, seems to have an immense control over the process, knows where all the levers are, sort of like The Godfather, that he makes offers you can't refuse. He got a lot of deals done at the end of session that a lot of us did not think were possible yet. I don't know if there were any horses, any beds, but they got done. Similar to Godfather Part 2, if you happen to like these movies, there's a lot of internal friction within the own family. Don't be on the outside of the speaker, though, or the Godfather, because you will find yourself sleeping with the fishes, as they say. And so no one better put that on Twitter. I have to work with him and his team.
Yeah, this is all in the trust tree. Yeah. All of this is in the trust tree.
So, but it's you hear a lot about this. I mean, Florida Trend even wrote about it. Never have we. It's been almost 20 years since you've had someone in a presiding officer position that seems to have this much control over the process. It'll be curious to see how this coming session goes with that. Usually, presiding in the second session, presiding officers, their power wanes as the designates' power gains. And so, Jose Oliva out of Miami, he'll be moving up, and not to mention some of the House members, again, in the trust tree here, they're not particularly fans of the leadership style that's come through. They feel like a lot of times they're taking votes they don't want to take. So it'll be curious to see how it goes. Is he going to be like the Godfather? Is he going to be like Michael Corleone and survive all the way to part 3? We'll find out. But with that, we're going to move to the Senate. And no one tweet that. Thanks. Okay.
So for the Senate, President Negron, we would compare to Indiana Jones, and that's for the following reason. Like the others that have come before it, it's a multi-part story. Senator Negron's career has certainly been a multi-part career, and there may be more chapters to come. But the Senate is a body that is more traditional, more steeped in history. As you know, Indiana Jones movies tend to all take place in a different important historical time, and it has a very cult-like following. The Indiana Jones movies, you either love them or you're not really into them. But either way, if you love them, you're very invested in it. And the Senate is much that way. It's a more cordial body. It's a more historical body, steeped in tradition and history. And President Negron leads that now, and will for at least one more session, or for one more session, not at least.
So I told Robert we should have went with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, because I feel like him, Senate President Negron and Budget Chairman Latvala felt a little bit like Butch and Sundance against the Mexican army towards the end of session when the House was coming in. But hopefully this next session works out a little better for them than it did for Butch and Sundance. So let's move on to, good, you've seen that movie. So the Cabinet. We kind of view the Cabinet as like Pulp Fiction. So if you've seen the movie, you know. Bear with us. No one's getting their head shot in the back of a car or something like that. But so the Cabinet, if you know these members, whether you have to work with them, like Shane Haseeb and us, we work with the CFO's office. It's cult-like following. Like that is your niche. That's what you do. And sort of like Pulp Fiction, people love this movie or have never even heard of it. And just like Pulp Fiction, there's a few characters, but every character, the role they play in the movie is very important. Our Cabinet. Some of you probably don't know who our new CFO is. Some of you might not. You probably know who Agriculture Commissioner Putnam is because he's running for governor. And then, of course, Pam Bondi, Attorney General. Some of you may not know them or who they are, but in their world, they're extremely important. And just like in Pulp Fiction, every character in its world happens to matter. And then, of course, who's the governor in that? Then, no, we won't go there. Okay.
So the president and the speaker designates, as many of you know who follow the process, the legislature, particularly the House of Representatives, has a tendency to pick their leadership well in advance of the time when they actually ascend into that chair. So right now in the House, we already know who the next speaker is, Jose Oliva, who the speaker after that is, Chris Sprowls, and as of just recently, who the speaker after that is, Paul Renner. In the Senate, at least the next two are decided. And that is Senator Bill Galvano, who will take over after the 2018 elections, and then Senator Wilton Simpson, who's the current majority leader, will take over after that. Becoming the presiding officer in the Florida legislature is not an easy task. It's a difficult slog through fundraising, through getting to know your members, through traveling the state. It is not an easy thing to get to, but when you get there, it's a pretty great spot to be, and so we compare that to Shawshank Redemption. For those of you that have seen the movie, Andy Dufresne literally crawls through a tube of poop.
You just ruined the movie for someone. Right?
Okay. To get to freedom. And so once he got to freedom, it was pretty great. But getting there is not always that easy. And so that's why we picked that one.
I went with Jaws, and only with the following, that the speaker designates or the Senate president designates, they don't do a lot of floor speeches. Sometimes you see it, but they lurk behind the scenes at all times, just like the shark in Jaws. You don't see it till the very end when it makes its strike and they need a bigger boat, but when you see the fin go up, you should be nervous if it's on your issue and you're not on your side. I kind of view them like Jaws in that way. So I picked this one because we love the senator here, but the Senate President pro tem and the Speaker pro tem, and it's not just because they're female, but we view it like Wonder Woman, and there's an analogy here, but she is Wonder Woman. So In the House and Senate, they're part of the leadership team, and they have to help keep the trains running on time. And sort of like Gal Gadot and Wonder Woman this past summer, in an otherwise uneventful DC universe, somehow she managed to make a massive box office success, much like Senator Flores and her counterpart on the other side, Representative Jeanette Nunez. They, while the president and the speaker are rattling sabers on policy and politics and other things, those two were making sure all the trains ran on time, and we got to a good close on session and special session. And that's not an easy job because they got to manage a lot of egos and keep even their presiding officers happy and keep things going. So it's a tough job there. Wonder Woman.
How'd we do? Is that okay?
Okay. It's the best one of the DC. Anyways.
So the House Majority and Minority Leaders, you see the names and the faces up there, but Majority Leader Wilton Simpson, House Majority Leader Ray Rodriguez, the Senate Minority Leader Oscar Branion, and the House Minority Leader Jeanette Cruz, they operate oftentimes in their own little universe. They care about their caucuses in their roles. Obviously, they have other things that they do as legislators, but in those roles, they care about their caucuses. They're worried about things that their caucus worries about and about the positions they're going to take on certain things. And oftentimes, amongst friends here, they're kind of ignored unless there's a really big issue that comes up, like when Vigo is about to attack New York City, and the Ghostbusters have to come to the rescue. So the Ghostbusters are often ignored, sometimes maligned, but when they save the city, everybody loves them. And in much the same way, the minority leaders and the majority leaders play an important role with their caucuses.
I don't know. I think that one bombed. Okay, so all right, revenue estimating conference. So these are those folks for essentially bean counters. And I don't mean to simplify or degrade, but so these are staff. No one's elected on that, but they get there and they look at the fiscal policy of the state. Just like every year, Amy Baker comes out like Groundhog Day and says, doom and gloom. The state's not going to have any money. She's been doing this for 15 years, I think, saying the state's going to go broke the next year. Except during the Great Recession, I think she's been wrong every year. But every year they come out and say the same thing. So in a lot of ways, we kind of view it like Groundhog Day. They look at all the numbers, the tax receipts, doc stamps, and everything, and say, "Oh, we're not going to have any money next year. We better cut." Similarly, if you're a lobbyist or a legislature and you got a piece of policy and you're trying to get it moved through, if this group says that it costs too much to the state, well, they're kind of like the Terminator, and they will kill your bill, and it won't move much further.
Sent from the future to kill your bill.
Yes.
So the candidates for governor, there's a few of them. There may be more before it's all said and done. Those faces and names are ones that are either already declared or are certainly expected to declare for governor. And over the next year or so, you will be asked often, are you not entertained? And they are gladiators.
That one did it. All right. So budget chairs. Representative Carlos Trujillo in the House and Senator Jack Latvala. So we use Titanic, if only for the reason that...
Don't let go, Jack.
Yeah, don't let go, Jack, see. So if anyone can become the icebergs for session, it's these two. They can either save it or they can bring it crashing down, because if they can't agree on something or if they don't agree with their presiding officers, and we almost saw it happen this past session, that iceberg's going to hit and everything's going to crater. So as we always say, the one constitutional requirement of this body that Ann Terry Flores belongs to is to pass a budget. They don't have to do anything else but pass a budget. And these two is where it's going to come or make or break. So let's hope we don't see any icebergs this year.
So your lobbyists are, of course, Iceman and Maverick. I
mean, you can be my wingman anytime.
Obviously, right? Obviously. So some issues to watch.
No explanation needed. No explanation.
So what to watch in 2018? You see a couple things there. One that I would add, of course, workers' comp. We talked a little bit about that. Hurricane relief, home rule attacks, higher education, budget issues. And wrapped into all of that, I would point out Hurricane Maria. This legislature is potentially going to be dealing with budgetary issues and social services issues and all the other state government roles while trying to estimate how many new Floridians we will have as a result of Hurricane Maria. Today alone, 200 were permanently relocated to Orlando alone. You could have a couple 100,000 new residents of Florida, and all of that is an unknown to some degree of what the legislature is going to have to deal with over the next couple of months as they get into session. So that's one that I would add. I don't know, Chris, if you have any, but that's one to really keep a close eye on as these folks who have, in many cases, lost everything relocate to Florida permanently, and we have a responsibility to care for those American citizens as they come here. So it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Speaker Corcoran jumped on the hurricane relief issue pretty soon thereafter. He talked about Irma, but I think Robert's accurate in that assessment. It's Maria that's probably going to have the biggest impact. I've heard estimates, and you guys probably heard the same. Easily 100,000 expected Puerto Ricans to relocate in Florida, possibly more, which will have impacts on our school system, which will have impacts on our healthcare system. Across the board. I know I'm preaching to the choir. You guys see this day in and day out in the services you provide, and that's going to have major impacts to the state. So. It'll be interesting to see that. And of course, it's an election year, as Senator Flores I think accurately pointed out. We think we're optimists as well, Senator. I think folks tend to behave better during election year, lobbyists included. And like she said, the goal is to bring stuff back home. So that'll always be part of it. The governor has always been more generous with his veto pen during election years. He's going to be on the ballot. That's something we didn't cover, but it's kind of the worst kept secret. We fully expect he will announce he's going to run for the U.S. Senate and take on Bill Nelson on the Democratic side. And so as such, he's going to try to make as many friends as he can, obviously staying true as best he can to his principles, but the more bacon that goes home that he doesn't veto, the more he can take credit when he barnstorms the state and says, vote for me. And no coincidence, not that his heart's not in the right place, that he and others immediately went to Puerto Rico. These folks are going to be voters by this time next year, everyone that comes over from the island. And, if you look demographically, they don't tend to line up with the Republican Party, and the governor's well aware of that. And 100,000 influx of voters, even if 50% of them vote, that can completely change the election results across the entire state. You can't take the politics out of politics. They're absolutely paying attention to some of that as well.
And with that, thank you. Thank you.
Any questions before we?
Hey guys,
Yeah.
did the legislature ever get the gambling deal done with the Seminoles?
No. So over the summer, the governor negotiated through. So a quick and very oversimplified recap is that when other pari-mutuels across the state started doing games that were similar to blackjack and others by the way they were using loopholes in the law, the Seminoles sued the state and said that you violated the exclusivity of our compact. And so that was an ongoing piece of litigation as the House and Senate tried to move closer and closer on a package that would renew the Seminole Compact, that would allow for a clear picture over the next decade or so of what gambling would be in our state. The Senate kind of started with a bit of an expansion of sorts. The House started with a retraction, and many of us thought, oh, this might actually come to a finish line because you could kind of see a middle ground that everyone could live with. But alas, after a few meetings, there was no middle ground, and they kind of called it off, and they got rid of the conference. But over the summer, the governor settled that lawsuit with the Seminoles, which will allow them to have their, which puts more money into the state coffers, but also allows them to have their blackjack. So we're in a bit of a gray area, not just legally, but politically. In theory, and as it's best been explained to me, is that could stand. The legislature doesn't have to do anything, and that compact will now stand for the rest of that life of the compact. I think it has about 20 more years over the full compact, with blackjack allowed on the Seminole sites and money going to the state. But as it goes, there's a lot of other interested parties on this, pari-mutuels and the like, that want to see an actual comprehensive plan done. So to answer your question, Shay, no, the deal was not done. They kind of went to conference, which gave some of us hope that it would get done, but it didn't happen. And then over the summer, a monkey wrench was thrown in by the Seminoles settling out with the states. So the Seminoles aren't near as motivated to get that deal done right now. As much as they love some of the other games to offer, which means more money for them and the state, right now they're still sitting pretty good. So that motivation is a little less because they don't have that legal entanglement anymore. But I expect, and I don't mean to put Senator on the spot, but she might agree or not, I expect you'll see something come back this year, but whether it passes or not, I don't know.
The reason for mentioning that bill was that became the vehicle. This very simple, otherwise innocuous bill became the vehicle for the changes to Enterprise Florida and Visit Florida. And Chris mentioned those. But that bill did, I guess it did ultimately pass pass in the regular session. But that small, otherwise innocuous vehicle that I think was a repealer of a former law became a 150-page reform of Enterprise Florida and Visit Florida.
And those of you in the more populous areas, at least on the House side, you'll see that Visit Florida conversation revisited, but more on your local tourism agencies. Here in Orlando, where Robert and I live, Visit Orlando has been taking a lot of punches from the speaker over some of the contracts they have and the transparency measures. Some of it's related to the fact that the legislation that passed made it required that if you partner with Visit Florida, you have to disclose salaries of all your board members, public or private. So I understand why the CEO of Walt Disney Resorts does not want to disclose his salary. I think we could probably guess what number of digits are in it, but he probably doesn't want that out for public consumption, nor do some of the others on that board. Some I've already heard are going to try to tweak that. If that is the issue, they'll tweak that and say that only public employees will have their salaries disclosed. Corcoran and others perhaps are going to use those tourism marketing agencies, the local ones, as punching bags this coming session. I can promise you that. Specifically, what would you like to cover on higher education?
Just with regard to the expansion of Bright Futures for the state university system.
Sure. So Bright Futures last year it was part of the global higher education package the President Negron was pushing forward. And while the governor vetoed the ultimate bill, some of that was in the proviso language. So Bright Futures is covered this year. I'm pretty sure that bill's up in the Senate this week. The package is brought back. It's got some tweaks in it. To be honest, I haven't gotten in the weeds yet of all the particulars of that bill, but I do know it goes back to fully funding Bright Futures. And I expect, given the governor's guidance on that veto, and really that had more to do with the state college system than the university system, that the president and, of course, the speaker will figure out a way to come up with a bill that the governor will approve. But then again, as you get to as Senator Flores says, at those last weeks, that's when they really start paying attention and everything gets laser focused. Politics will come into play, so hopefully they can get around some of those politics and get that done and passed.
I think on that one in particular, and I have not read the entire bill, but I think that the state university system changes that were basically universally agreed to is now going to be a separate bill from the state college part, which was a section of that bill or sections of that bill which caused the governor's veto. That'll be broken out into its own piece of legislation and it'll work its way through. But the stuff that everyone seemed to like Bright Futures, will go in its own bill until they all get wrapped together at the end anyway, which is what they're known to do. All right. Well, we will keep y'all. Oh, yeah, sure, Shane.
Do we put Sarah on the spot and ask her to make a committee bill out of our expansion of FISA?
Sure. Be careful. I got nothing else going on.
Well, thank y'all so much. We really appreciate the chance to be here with you. Thank you.